All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Bayside Singles, Granite Bay Campus. Dave Schaefer, Dan Crystal, and Barbara Wilson with you guys. Hope you're having a great Thursday night. Man, what an amazing series of Thursday it's been. And I think one of my favorites was last Thursday. But welcome, everybody. Barb, how are you doing? How was your week?
I'm doing great. My week was good. How about you, Dave?
Well, you know what? Like I say, a lot less news. Turn off the TV and make a good story, everybody.
Right.
That's the key to it. How about you, Dan? What's shaking?
Oh, wow. This week has been unbelievable. Just so many great things happening, and just to be a part of it has just been exhilarating. And I just saw the first person to respond on here was Linda. I think it's Stoopy. And she said, hi to all, my first time joining you. The first comment in here is a first timer. Linda, good to see you. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
So, yeah. So, Dave, would you mind if I shared a couple of cool wins while everyone's chiming in?
Please do. I was hoping you would.
Oh, good. So yesterday, well, first of all, let me back up. My wife has been working with these mask projects literally since the whole COVID-19 thing happened. And Bayside to date, before yesterday, had literally sewn and delivered probably 25 or 27,000 fabric masks all over the Northern California area. We've shipped them to other parts of the state. Amazing, amazing. And then so we actually had a company contact us named Go Masks, and their hashtag Go Masks or at Go Masks 2020 on Instagram.
Wow.
And they donated 3,000 of these black masks for us to be able to deliver to Sun City Lincoln residents.
Oh my.
So we partnered with Bayside Adventure. We said, hey, we need you guys to help us with this. And Jeremy Drew, Brian Hartwick, James Powell, and Michael Metcalf, the two co-senior pastors at Adventure, showed up in force. We had 20 volunteers, many of them singles, just taking their time to do what they need to do. And they came out, and we literally in 3.5 hours were out of, and we had another 500 fabric masks with us. We literally handed out 3,500 masks to the senior living community up in Sun City and Lincoln.
Wow.
The cars were a mile long all the way down the street for hours.
That's beautiful.
Unbelievable. And then last night, I'm hoping that many people chimed in last night, but last night we had one of the most powerful prayer meetings that I think we've had to date. I mean, the mental health one was incredible, and I think this one was equally as important. And we talked about the response to racism as Christians, and just hearing the story of even some of our own pastors and what they've gone through. It's incredibly moving. And not only moving, if we are listening to what they're saying, it should drive us to action, to be a part of the solution. So I just want to share all that with everybody, because I'm still on a high from yesterday. It's been an amazing couple weeks. And if you hear Harry Potter, it's because my wife's trying to call me because she's trying to leave my granddaughter's room.
Is she being held captive?
She's being held captive by almost 3-year-old.
You know what? We're called not to be prideful, but I'm super proud of our leadership at Bayside for taking on a really tough thing head on and not shying away from it when a lot of people are in society, in terms of, racism is something that is just repugnant, and we know that. Yet we've done some good things about it, and obviously we're not even closed yet, because things like what happened a couple months ago in Georgia are still happening. And so, anyways, you guys, I commend our leadership. But without any further ado, we're gonna get right to it, Barb, because the topics that you've been bringing, these two topics have been amazing. Or this one's gonna be amazing. Yeah, last week was off the charts. Almost 1,000 views, lots of great questions, and people really sharing. So, and that goes to a lot how you are, and just really receptive to everybody in your knowledge of the field. So let's get right to it. Heavenly Father God, what an amazing time this is, God. What an amazing ministry, God. I just invite you here, God. Be with all of us. Be with Barb. Be with Dan and myself and everybody who's tuned in to see this, God. Have your way with us. Touch deeper than you ever have, God. Give us the security to open up and ask questions that we need to ask for our healing, God. Father, you're a God of miracles. We're praying for our nation and for the world, God, that this pandemic, just take it away, God. And when doing so, God, just unite humanity. So, Father, we invite you here. Have your way with our hearts, way with Barbara, and everybody who's here tonight, God. Thank you for your love and your mercy and your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Looking forward to this.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. It's great to be back. Thanks so much for all your kind words and the great questions from last week. And actually had some kind of email me with some comments and questions about the topic tonight. And I'm really excited about the topic tonight. Now, I did bring a PowerPoint, so I'm not sure if Rich is there with my PowerPoint, but basically what I was going to talk about tonight is how to build, emotionally healthy relationships that last. And this is kind of in my wheelhouse. This is what I've been teaching and talking about and writing about since about 2004. And so I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited to share with you. And, as I've gone on and got my doctorate in clinical psychology and just kind of understanding just how important, relationships are for us and intimacy. And, we literally are created for relationship, basically from the cradle till the grave. And I'm a big fan of attachment theory. I don't know if you guys know a little bit about that, but basically talks about when we're first born, that first primary caregiver is that most important attachment figure for us. And if that attachment is healthy, then we're able to go on and be able to feel more confident in ourselves, feel safe in the world, that we're going to be able to get our needs met, that we're going to be able to have healthy relationships. And then, once we, grow up, become adults and get married, we transfer that significant attachment to our spouse. Now, what can happen though, is if that earlier attachment figure wasn't super healthy and that bond wasn't really strong, then sometimes we can end up with unhealthy attachment patterns. And that's kind of what I work with people in my office, in my counseling office, with couples, kind of helping them kind of understand how sometimes, that attachment has impacted their ability to even recognize healthy relationships or be able to build healthy relationships. But that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. I want to talk to you about kind of what, how do we build healthy relationships? So in this next slide, I want to show you, basically psychologists say that we go through these different levels of intimacy as we get to know someone. So it starts at the lowest and goes to the highest. So this could be with, any kind of friendship, but we're going to kind of look at it from a romantic relationship where you're, wanting to build a significant relationship with someone. And so I'm going to just go through and kind of define these different levels. And then we're going to talk about, what that looks like as you're building that relationship. So at the lowest level, this is where we talk about the safest kind of things, like just factual things, right? So, we talk about the weather, or, we talk about, a sports game that, won or lost, the night before or whatever. So these are things that you can share with anyone. There isn't any really risk involved. No one's really going to reject you, on some factual information. When we get to the low level of intimacy, this is where we begin to share others' opinions. So maybe something that we've read, or, someone that we really admire. We're going to share, something that they've said, or something, maybe from our family members or something. Now, this is a little bit more riskier than the lowest level, because now you're sharing an opinion. And even though it's not necessarily your opinion, in a way, because you're sharing it, you're kind of aligning yourself with that opinion. However, so with each of these levels, there's a little bit of a back door. So if you're feeling kind of threatened, or, not threatened, but if you're feeling like you're going to be rejected, in this friendship that you really want to build, you're going to be able to kind of backdoor it. So on the low level, if, somebody doesn't agree with this something that you read or something that you shared, you can say, well, I'm just sharing what someone said. I'm not necessarily, saying that I totally agree with that, right? So let's move up to the next level. So the next level is the moderate level, and that's where we begin to share our own opinions and our own beliefs, our likes and dislikes. So again, this is a little bit more risky because you're sharing from your own perspective. And so if you're feeling like someone might, kind of not agree with you, and you really care about this relationship, and, you want them to like you, you might negotiate your opinion. You may kind of, backtrack a little bit on your opinion. Well, I'm not a fanatic about it or something like that. At the next level, we have the high level. Now, this is kind of the level we're at with our close, group of friends that we hang out with. This is where we share a lot more information about ourselves, kind of our background, our values, our dreams, our goals. These are the people, we might bring home to meet our family, right, at this level. So this is definitely, a much more intimate, much more, riskier level, because you're sharing a lot more about yourself. So let's say you share something about yourself and somebody goes, what, you did that? Or I can't believe your family does that. You might, then you can kind of say, well, I've changed, or, you can kind of have some way to kind of, make yourself feel a little bit better if that person doesn't necessarily agree with what you're sharing. And then the last level, the highest level, this is the level that needs the most amount of trust in a relationship, because at this level, you're going to share absolutely everything about yourself. You're not only all the things from the other levels, but now your hurts, your fears, your secrets, but also your needs and those, kind of natural emotional reactions that we have. So this is where we are our true selves. This is often, at a level where we don't want a lot of people to see this, because let's say, I'm having a bad day, and, you see me, yelling at my kids or something. And I would, unless I really felt like I could trust you that you're not going to judge my entire character on what I did in that one moment, I'm not going to want you to see that, because I'm going to be afraid that, you're just going to like lump me into this big category, and you're going to reject me, and you're not going to want to be my friend. And so this level is really, really important. So when you look at these levels, first of all, psychologists say that at that highest level of intimacy, we might have about 3 people in our lives at that highest level. So it's a very specialized place to be. And the interesting thing about that level is, you want to be able to trust that no matter how you're acting in certain days, that person is not going to judge you. They're going to accept you, and they are going to believe in you, and they're going to, believe that, you're a lot of good things, and that you might have one bad day, but it's not the end of everything. So when you're building a relationship, so let's say a romantic relationship that you're really wanting, or like hoping that this is something that's going to develop into something. How does that look when you're building that with someone? So the important thing to remember is that true intimacy actually happens when both people are moving up this intimacy levels together. And so this can be often the area that gets kind of out of whack for some people, because sometimes someone can be speaking, maybe, let's say, at the high level, but the other person is really only sharing at the moderate level. And sometimes, you can feel like you're actually closer than you really are. And so, and often, girls, I'd have to say, we're probably, and this is, I realize this is, a generality, but often we're a little bit more kind of in tune to more emotional kind of intimacy, wanting to, develop that. We're much more, kind of geared that way. And, not that guys can't do it, but sometimes, it's often the woman in the relationship that's kind of drawing that out. And so sometimes I often talk to young, especially young girls, or even just, other women in my office at different at different ages, we tend to kind of skip over some of those levels. Sometimes we can go from the lowest, we skip over to the moderate, and then we're speaking at the highest. And we kind of don't realize that the guy in our relationship hasn't really caught up to us yet. And we're already speaking that highest level. And so really recognizing that you want to be able to move together up those levels, that's what helps you have true intimacy. Okay, so before we move on from this, I want to kind of talk with you about what are some things that can keep us from moving to that next level of intimacy. So there's a variety of things, and you might want to add some things in the comments here if you think of some things. But first of all, past hurts in past relationships could keep you from being able to move up to that next level, because you've been hurt before. And so you might say, I'm not going to share too much of myself with this person. I'm going to be more guarded. And that could be something. Trauma could, past trauma in your relationship, or even trauma as a young child, that could also cause you to feel more guarded, and you have difficulty with trust. You have difficulty feeling safe. Remember, we talked about that attachment, those earlier attachments. If you felt like, when you were a young child, you weren't sure when you needed something from your significant caregiver, if you were going to be able to receive that, or if you were hurt and you weren't really comforted, then you may not really believe that, you're going to have those needs met. And so you might, keep those things secrets, things that we don't want that other person to know, because we're afraid that if they know about that, they may not like us anymore. And then the other thing is just fear of conflict. I think that actually, interestingly, the one thing that you need to be able to move to those higher levels is being able to deal with conflict. And I think in our culture, we definitely are a little bit afraid of conflict. We kind of, I should say myself, I don't like conflict either. So, we tend to avoid conflict because that's uncomfortable and we don't know how to deal with that. And, but honestly, the key to being able to move to those next levels is being able to risk conflict. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but being able to, having the courage and feeling safe enough in that relationship to take that little step towards some conflict, to be able to share something, a need that you have, a boundary that you want to talk about, a value that you want to see if you have the same values. And that takes a little bit of courage to move to that next level. But the one big thing that I want to talk about that really can impact moving up to that next highest level of intimacy is sexual intimacy outside of marriage. So when we have sex outside of marriage in a relationship, so let me just ask you this. So where, knowing about just kind of sexual intimacy, what we know about it, where do you think people should be at before they have sex in a relationship? Obviously in marriage, but where do you think they should be at in their levels of intimacy? And so if you are thinking at the highest level, then you are correct. So the highest level is the safest place for people to be having sexual intimacy. And of course, we would expect that to be happening once you're in marriage. But here's what happens. Like, for example, when most of the people that I talk to, they are beginning to have sex at the low or moderate level in a relationship outside of marriage. All right. So when you're at the low or moderate level, how well do you really know that person? And when you start to involve alcohol or other substance abuse, a lot of people are actually at the lowest level. This is what happens a lot in college, a lot of hooking up culture. They really barely know each other. And so you can see when we begin to have sex at these lower levels, how that's impacting our ability to build that, to have that kind of intimacy that we want. Because here's what happens. Now, some of you have heard me talk before, and one of my expertise is just on the brain and sex and bonding, and some of the things, the chemicals and hormones that we release when we have sexual intimacy, and the hormone that, that real bonding hormone that has a lot to do with the attachment that I talked about earlier is oxytocin. And so we know a lot about oxytocin. We know that Oxytocin is released in high levels 3 times in a human when a woman gives birth, when she breastfeeds, and released in high levels in men and women during sexual arousal and release. And so oxytocin is God's kind of like human bonding hormone. And it really creates this amazing bond that happens. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that can kind of get kind of damaged a little bit in our cycle of broken relationships. But let's say you're at the moderate level in a relationship and you start having sex, and you're releasing all these chemicals and hormones that make you feel bonded and make you feel attached to that person. When I've done some research and talked to other psychologists on this, what can happen is it creates this false sense of intimacy. You're only, let's say, at the moderate level, you're really only sharing your own opinions, your own beliefs and thoughts. But because you're having sex, you're creating this intimate bond. In fact, you actually feel married now because, sexual intimacy is one of those glues that creates that one flesh bond. And so you're actually feeling married. You feel closer than you are. And this is where psychologists say, what can happen is once you start having sex at whatever level you're at is kind of where that relationship gets stalled. And it's difficult to want to risk conflict to move into those higher levels. And that's because you've created this intimate relationship. You feel married. This is the person you feel like this is the one. You're going to get married. But really, you don't know that person as well as you think you do. And in fact, sex can really cloud that relationship. Let me give you an example. In my book, I talk about this steam pipe example. So if you imagine a steam pipe that's got little tiny hairline cracks that you can't see, and at the end of the steam pipe is a valve that turns off and on. But let's say, okay, so you're having sex. So imagine sex is kind of the steam that's coming through the steam pipe, and those little tiny hairline cracks are, just difficulties in your relationship, or differences of opinions or values, or things that you haven't really talked about, conflicts that you haven't really worked through. That's what those little tiny cracks are. But as long as you're having sex, the valve is open. So sex means the valve's open, that steam's going through, and there's no steam going out through the cracks because you have that valve open, and everything is just going through. So the sex kind of makes it seem like everything's okay. There's not really any conflicts, or you're able to resolve the conflicts. But let's say you close that valve, so which signifies you stop having sex. And now when the steam goes through, it has to go out through those little tiny cracks. And those little cracks are those conflicts, those things that you're not talking about in that relationship, those things that you're not talking about that are keeping you from moving to those higher levels. And so by closing that valve, it actually makes you talk about those issues. And so what the psychologist that I use for this, or talk about with this, his name is Roger Hillstrom. He wrote a book about this and called Intimate Deception. And he just, I had actually a phone conversation with him, and he said, yeah, I tell couples if they come to me and they're struggling, they're not married and they're having sex, I'll say, stop having sex, because it's clouding your relationship. It's actually keeping you from really knowing that person, and it's keeping you from being able to move to that next level of emotional intimacy. And in fact, he will tell couples who are married, who had sex before they got married, to have a short fast from sex in their relationship, because if they did have sex before marriage and didn't get to that highest level, it allows them to get to that highest level and be able to become more emotionally intimate, where they can really share all of those things and feel completely safe and trusting in their relationship. And so I want to show you a little bit on this next slide, just how the oxytocin can start to impact our ability in relationships to be able to kind of sustain those healthy relationships. And so here we have, I'm going to share with you a little bit about oxytocin, because it's like my favorite hormone. I just think God is so amazing in how he designed us. And so here you are, the top of the slide is that little box that says positive social contact, hugs, sexual activity. So let's say you've started a relationship and now you're releasing oxytocin. So oxytocin does this amazing thing. It improves trust, reduces anxiety, reduces fear, reduces stress, and creates something called positive memory airbrushing. So positive memory airbrushing means that oxytocin actually improves our recall of positive events and decreases our recall of negative events. And so if you are a middle or younger child, you can thank God for oxytocin, because I'm sure your mother would have never had another child without oxytocin after the first one. I'm sure I wouldn't have. All right. So now you're in this relationship and you're creating this bond. But let's say outside of marriage, that relationship breaks up and now you're in relationship failure and now you're in emotional pain. And so when we're in emotional pain, just like we're in physical pain, we release endorphins chronically. So endorphins is our brain's natural pain reliever. And what studies have shown, they've done like a lot of studies with mammals who similar kind of system as ours in terms of the brain, some of the brain processes. And what they discovered was that when you begin to release endorphins chronically, it can actually begin to inhibit the production and release of oxytocin. And so now you're in pain, and once you are, you're having these endorphin release longer than 72 hours, now it's beginning to impact your ability to release and produce oxytocin. So now you have less oxytocin releasing. But when you're in emotional pain and you've just come out of a relationship, and often what happens is we jump into another relationship pretty quick, just because, first of all, we know what that felt like. It felt good to be in that relationship. It feels good to be loved. It feels good to be close to someone. And we also know, kind of that sexual intimacy creates that bonding. And so we kind of jump into that next relationship often way too soon. We haven't healed from the one that we just came out of. But now we're going to be releasing a little less oxytocin because we're still really in emotional pain, except this new relationship kind of covers that. We feel better because now we're releasing a whole bunch of new chemicals in a new relationship. And so we think that we're over that last one. We're not really over that last one. Those wounds are going to start coming back up eventually. It may feel okay for now, but those wounds have not gone away. And they are going to be triggered again at some point in this next relationship. But because you're releasing less oxytocin, you're going to have less trust, more fear, more anxiety, and more stress in this next relationship. And so, in effect, you're actually going to be bonding just a little bit less. And that's some of those things I talked about. If you've had past hurts and past relationships, it's going to keep you from being able to move to those higher levels of intimacy. And one of the reasons is that you're more guarded, and and part of that is your brain chemistry. It is telling you, screaming at you, don't get too close, don't trust. And so that's all working together to create this relationship that's not as bonded, even though let's say you have started having sex. And now that the chance of that relationship breaking up is even greater. And so then we end up in this cycle of broken relationships, which is really not what God designed. And that's why it's so crucial for healing. It's so crucial to be able to heal from a relationship before you rush into another one, mainly because, first of all, you don't want to be rushing into a relationship, number one, but you definitely don't want to be adding sexual intimacy, because not only is that going to impact your ability to have the kind of bond that you want, but also it's going to be impacting that emotional intimacy. And, eventually, let's say you want to get married one day, and here we have, sometimes I do my little hearts, I didn't bring them tonight, but, we end up with these multiple bonds that we've created that kind of get stuck on us, that, can then impact our ability to have the kind of bond that we want eventually in a lifetime relationship. And, honestly, I share a lot of this from the scientific perspective, but I also share it from my own perspective. And, just a little story about me. Well, I think I shared some of my testimony last week, but with my husband I'm married with right now. We'll be married 39 years next month. But in my Kiss Me Again book, I talk about how we had sex before we got married. And when I was like learning about all this stuff, and learning about the levels of intimacy, I was at this point in my relationship and I'm going, why does it feel like so difficult to really share at a really deep level? with him. And I thought, man, I married the wrong person. He's kind of boring. We can't really talk very deeply. And it was really interesting. I was out talking about this one day, and God said, well, I could just hear, I was in the middle of a talk, and he goes, so you're telling everyone else to do this, but you're not willing to do it yourself. And so, I kind of was joking around with him because, even our sexual intimacy wasn't great just because of my trauma in my past. And so I kind of made this joke. I said, hey, like, you want to improve our, sexual intimacy? How about we take a short fast from sex? Because that's what this Roger Hillestrom recommended. And so he kind of jumped on that. He thought that would be a great idea. And so, we just did it for like 3 or 4 weeks. And during that time is honestly when I did all of my own healing. And we were able to move up to that highest level of intimacy, which completely changed our relationship. And that was back at about year 2021, maybe. And here we are, it's 39 years. And the last 20 years have been amazing. And I'm just really thanking God for that. But so it really is important to understand, just how this can be impacted in relationships, because what happens with all those couples that get, they're having sex at the moderate level, and then they get married. And then when some of that, newness of marriage wears off, and then they look at each other and they realize, I don't really know you. I thought I knew you, but here we are, we've been talking at this level. And, unfortunately, I have couples come into my office who have been talking at these low levels of intimacy their entire relationship. They've never, ever gone to those deeper levels. And so much of that can be remedied or avoided when we really, when we do things God's way. And he cares so much about our marriages, about our own lives, that he wants us to have those kind of deep relationships and that deep intimacy. And so in the next slide, I just wanted to share just a few kind of tips. And I know I'm kind of watching my time here, probably starting to run out of time. You tell me when you want me to stop. But I had some ideas just for some dating wisdom. And this is in chapter 9 of my Invisible Bond book, where I go into more details about this. But a really great book I recommend by Dan Raniker, Rannniker, called Choosing God's Best Wisdom for Lifelong Romance, is for singles on how to build a really great intimate relationship that will last a lifetime. And I do share kind of some tips from it from my chapter 9 in my Invisible Bond book. But he kind of talks about how we, in our culture, our dating actually is kind of preparing us for divorce. Because what happens is, he calls marriage like breakup -1. So we break up with all the previous dates we have, except for the one that we marry. And he kind of says we're kind of doing it backwards. Like, we start dating, and then we become friends, and then we realize, I don't like you, or we don't have the same interests, or we don't have the same values, and then we break up. Or what I see a lot is then people start having sex in that relationship, and then they hang on in that relationship far longer than they ever needed to or wanted to, or even long after they realize this is not a good relationship. And they spend months and months in these broken cycles of relationships doing that. And so Dan Raniker says, what if we switched it around? And what if we become friends first and then move to dating? And he talks about 4 different levels of friendships: acquaintances, casual friendship, close friendship, and then intimate friendship. And you kind of move up those levels as you move into dating. And, it actually kind of makes sense, right? If we kind of, become friends with somebody, whether it's through our, singles group or some other kind of group, or, we're doing things in groups, and we're getting to know that person. And then we realize that's someone I could really spend my life with. He or she shares my values, and then kind of move into dating. That can really just save you a lot of that other pain that I talked about. Real quick, just some ideas for dating. Have planned dates. A lot of times what I hear from couples, once they kind of start dating, then they just start kind of hanging out and watching a movie and not really doing anything. And that really, kind of makes it easier to have sex too soon in a relationship. And so having planned dates can really help with that, and just really bring a lot of fun and intimacy into your relationship. Set boundaries. Dan Raniker suggests not only physical boundaries, but like time boundaries, emotional boundaries, things that you even talk about. because some of the things that you talk about that are too emotionally intimate can also increase kind of that temptation for sexual intimacy. I really recommend that if you're, wanting this relationship to really blossom and grow into something that's going to be healthy, then have an accountability, get a mentor couple who help you walk through this relationship and mentor you as a couple. And this is also a great way to find out more about that person and what they're really like is serve together. And then maybe study and pray together in like a small group is another great way. So those are just some tips, and you can ask more questions about that as we kind of go into question time. But my last slide, I just really want to share with you what healing looks like. And so often I just see so many people moving quickly into these next relationships, and they don't take time to heal. And all the reading I've done and in psychology, just understanding the importance of healing from past relationships and just understanding what are the wounds that, have caused you pain from that relationship. What were some of the, kind of processing, what were some of the issues with that relationship? Where did it go wrong? What were some of the things that you didn't, weren't together on, so that you can understand that moving into that next relationship and getting whole yourself, seeking God, becoming a more godly person and seeking Him will also help heal, but also help you become the person that you want to attract. The more we seek God, the more that we become more of the person that we want to attract, and we won't attract the kind of person that we don't want. We need to grieve losses. We need to look at the lies that we've ingrained because of things that have happened in our past or with that past relationship. And then we need to break those those kind of sexual bonds. In my book, I have talk about writing out your sexual history list and saying a prayer to, just ask God to break those bonds that we've created, especially when those relationships have involved sexual intimacy. But the awesome thing is that as we take time to heal, we're no longer in that emotional pain. And when we're no longer in that emotional pain, we actually stop releasing endorphins chronically. And then we're able to start, we're actually able, it repairs our oxytocin system, where we're actually able to start producing and releasing oxytocin again. And, the awesome thing is that I get to watch this happen all the time as people come into my study and find healing. Not only do they become whole, but they begin to, they have more confidence in themselves. And, broken people, and it's so true, broken people attract broken people. But when you're whole and healthy, you aren't going to attract broken people, because you're not even going to, you're not going to give them give them yourself in that way. You're not, because you're going to recognize that. You're going to want to be with healthy people in a relationship. You're going to recognize that brokenness. You're going to, be able to set those kind of boundaries that you need. And, you're going to be able to advocate for yourself, and especially be able to set those healthy boundaries. I often have people come into my office, and they're in these cycles of relationship, and it's kind of like that definition of insanity. We do doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. And often it's, they get to the place where they think that I'm damaged. I will never be able to have a relationship. And that's not true. It's that the truth is that when we stop doing those same things that are creating that relationship cycle of broken relationships, that's when, we begin to get healthy and heal and be able to have that healthy relationship that we long for. And so those are just some of the things that I wanted to share with you. It's really brief. I'm sorry it's so quick, but my book Invisible Bond, I go into a lot more detail, and also with the healing that you can help heal, and then what dating looks like, what healthy dating looks like, what it means to really build a healthy relationship. And so I hope you'll check that out. Email me or ask some questions if you want to talk a little bit more, but I'd love to talk with you more about it.
Wow, that's outstanding. You guys give it up for Barbara. I'm amazing. Thank you so much. A lot of great content there, and I know there's been a lot of questions. I'd like to ask one because I get this asked a lot, particularly from ladies within our ministry. And over the 10 years that I've been doing singles ministry, um, we talk about just that that a great date starts with a great friendship, right?
Mhm.
And and so people do such a great job of respecting one another that way. But one question that I was reminded from my friend Terry, he says, "How can you tell when a friendship is more than friends?" Because what happens is one, particularly with guys, let's say they don't verbalize what's going on, and then and they're spending all this time with this lady, or it goes both ways actually. And then next thing you know, they go, well, "Do they like me? Because I really like them." And then they only find out to get their hearts broken. Is there anything they can do to kind of nip that off or tell? I mean, when do you know it's more than friends?
Well, I guess that, that takes some courage to be able to, share about how you're feeling and kind of put your toe in the water, I guess, so to speak, right? I mean, it's not, it's kind of difficult and it's scary. But, when you start seeing somebody that's kind of, coming over to you or kind of singling you out, and you're starting to feel some feelings for that person, it's like you start asking, because you know people, if they wait and wait and they never find out, that can be very stressful. It's been a long time since I've been in the dating world, so so, that is it's it's always hard to do that, but it's worth it, to find out and say, hey, I'm interested. It's kind of interesting. I have two sons that are married, and now they, were younger when they got married. So, but one's been married 15 years and one's married 13 years now. But I was they kind of taught me how to do this, and I was like amazed at them. But they were kind of friends with their wives for several months in their groups, and with my one son, they kind of joke about it because they both liked each other for a while, but never said anything to each other. And it just kind of all worked itself out. Whereas then my son, kind of went to her and said, "Hey, I'm actually interested in you. What do you, are you interested in me?" And then they moved into dating, and it was very interesting how they did that. They actually became friends first, and then started, working towards sharing their feelings with these girls, and then moved to dating. And it really saved them a lot of heartache because they didn't end up having a lot of broken hearts, in their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find too, Dave and Barb, that it's the attraction part of a relationship or a friendship that comes into between a man and a woman. If one is attracted, the other one's not, then there's this whole game that's played. That is, I'm just gonna when they do test it, and then they may misread it. And I think the question really also centers around how can you uh, corral the attraction feelings and then determine if the relationship is strong enough to actually move forward beyond friendship. What do you think about what do you think about that?
Well, I think that is, again, just how well, in that friendship, what kind of things are you talking about, and understanding, does that feel like someone is taking more of an interest in you? I think sometimes, like, we can kind of tell, if someone's taking an interest in us. Sometimes we have an interest in someone else, and you can tell they don't really have an interest in you. But if you kind of kind of sense that there might be some interest back, and then you just kind of keep moving forward and showing more interest, or kind of talking more with them, and then it kind of just progresses.
Yeah.
I realize it's, it gets more and more difficult, just you know I think maybe as we get a little bit older, it's a little scarier to do that, possibly, especially if you've had a lot of heartache in the past, or if you've misread in the past. And of course, that's going to make it more difficult to kind of, trust your judgment. I just think that, um, the way to kind of jump in there, and that's what those levels of intimacy, and take a chance at it. Because I mean,
Yeah.
either you're right or you're not, and if you're not right, then you're not going to be spending any more time dealing with that, and you can kind of put that to rest. It creates a lot of anxiety if you just like keep wondering.
Well, what I tell people is, listen, just be self-aware. Number one, that you're not the one giving away false signals, because they may like you, but be honest. But I think communication, it's like, what are your expectations? The only time I get let down by other people is when I set my expectations to a place they probably don't need to be, So, you know what I mean? So it's just set your expectations with each other and within the friendship. I mean, I don't think that's a bad question to say, hey, are we more than just friends?
Mhm.
What's your feeling about it? Because and you know what, I can see several times when people are just friends and they go, oh, it's never, I like him like a brother, and 3 years later they're married.
Mhm.
So
Exactly. My daughter-in-law said that to my son, my oldest son, and it like crushed his heart. But
Yep.
now they're married.
Yeah, what exactly what happened to me. Yeah.
I
Well,
would.
I'm not interested. You can just be friends, and I've been married for 36 years.
Mhm. Mhm.
Great question. Thank you so much.
If someone's really interested, I mean, if someone's really interested, they're going to pursue it. So
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
that's the nature of you know
Yeah,
the mating
absolutely.
game.
It's exciting for sure.
I'm not sure there's a lot of people that would agree with
It's
that part of it.
stressful and scary, and absolutely, I don't know. I think just like it's more stressful for guys. I'm not sure, but maybe if they feel that pressure to be the one that makes the first move, kind of thing.
Oh, this is a good question.
How do you, yeah, how do you know if you have closure? Yeah.
That's a great.
Well, that's and it does take time to heal from that. And the kind of the pain of that, especially if you weren't the one that, initiated the breakup. It takes some time. It's a real heartbreak, and that takes time. And when I was kind of reviewing and reading through again today, it takes time with um, kind of doing some of the processes that I talked about, whether it's working it through with, a professional or a good friend, but it's kind of, staying, kind of being with other friends and allowing that time to heal. And how do you know? I think, I think, because when you think of them, it doesn't hurt as much. It hurts a little bit less.
Yeah. Well, that's a lonely feeling. It's a lonely time in your life. Gosh.
Hmm. Yeah. And, and that's where that temptation is to kind of jump into that next relationship, because no one wants to sit in that pain and feel that. And when you get into that next relationship, it kind of, you're releasing all these new, dopamine and norepinephrine, all those great chemicals that make you feel better. And, we kind of fool ourselves thinking that we've healed from that last one, but
Yeah, I think closure too has a lot to do with you allow yourself to stop thinking about that person specifically, right? When you allow yourself to literally start thinking of other people as possibilities for you, there may be closure there. But I don't think, unless there's I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Barb, but sometimes I think there needs to be a subsequent conversation at some point where we just say, okay, I need to get some closure on this. Help me understand why.
hmm
But they have to be ready to hear that answer. That's the thing that I think becomes pretty difficult for a lot of people.
hmm yeah. And yeah, so I guess it's also too, like, like you said, how that's kind of ended, um, and how that was explained. And often, you need some time to be able to process those emotions, before you can actually go back and really hear what they have to say, or what that was. And because often we kind of, we do kind of feel like it's all about us, like what's wrong with me. And most of the time it's really not about us, it's about what's going on with that person.
Yeah.
Or not to take it personally.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan. Read
Oh
that.
wow, they're gonna throw that one my way, huh? So how does this affect those people who have affairs when the one left behind thought they were in the stage of the highest level of intimacy?
So sad.
It is. Oh man. Have you come across that kind of a thing in your counseling? I know you can't speak specifically to some with particular people, but what are some things you've experienced there?
What's that? Can I see the question again? So how does this? And I'm not sure what they're referring to as this. How does this affect?
I think it may have been towards closure, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. You have affairs when the one left behind. Well, that is, that's the greatest kind of betrayal, of course, and it's very, very painful. And especially if you felt like you were at the highest level of intimacy. And that is going to be a great deal of healing to be able to trust again at that highest level, for sure. And so that closure, someone who's gone through that, it's you really need to be able to kind of process that with someone who can help you understand and kind of really kind of heal at those deeper levels. And because often these things can happen, and sometimes these kind of things will happen in our life, and it actually can lead back to something that maybe even happened younger. So, a lot of times when I have people and I hear what's going on in their life, but then I go, so when did you feel like this before? Or, is there a time in your life that you felt like this before? And so, when similar hurts have happened, with each one, it gets more and more difficult. It becomes a greater wound that needs a different level of healing. So because each, kind of hurt or wound can kind of, can kind of make us a little less resilient to bounce back from the next thing. And so, a level of this kind of hurt, I would definitely get some help being able to process that. And I think, it's going to take some time to trust someone again at that highest level. But what I would say too is, I wonder if you were really at the highest level. Maybe it was one of those situations where you were at the highest, maybe you felt you were at the highest level, but that other person wasn't really at the highest level with you.
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer in a short amount of time, for sure. I think Rich just told us there's like 2 really great questions he wants to try to get to before we wrap up.
Great.
How do you ask a woman out for the first time in a healthy way? Well, I know what you don't do.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I can tell you one thing before you answer that question, Barb. I know what one thing you should not do, and that's, as a guy, you should never ever use the phrase "I put the stud in Bible study." You should never ever ever do that.
I've never heard that one. Is that new? Is that yours?
Yeah, that's no game at all, Dan. I'm sorry, bro.
That's called Bible school. Bible school pickup lines is what that's called.
Oh, that's Bible school pickup lines. There you go. Oh man, that's a tough one. How do you ask a woman out for the first time in a healthy way? I don't know. What would be an unhealthy way? Over text, that would be unhealthy. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, one of the things that we really try to adhere to within the singles ministry to keep it safe for everybody is that we ask that don't ask somebody out that you don't know. And it comes back to the same thing, and about getting to have a relationship, a friendship first, and a real friendship. And that's, I think if you start there, it's gonna make a big difference. Do something different. Don't just ask somebody you don't know out for a date if and you're expecting to get long lasting relationships, or at least healthy ones. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Know that person.
That's a good point. I get it now what they were asking. I think with a lot of the online dating now, so it makes it easier to you're kind of meeting people that you don't know. And I'm not, kind of familiar with that. I mean, I've never done that, so I'm not familiar with it. But I understand they talk for a little bit. But it kind of makes people a little more brave, right? When you're
Yeah.
kind of just talking to someone online, and you kind of think it's easier. But I agree with that, Dave. Yeah, it's know that person, have talked with them, maybe done something in a group with them where you actually know them, and that's where the singles ministry, I'm sure, provides a lot of opportunities to serve together, to be in small groups together. I'm just I'm
Yeah.
assuming that you have those kind of opportunities to do that. And I think from a woman's perspective anyways, I think when we see a guy being willing to be involved in some of those things, it kind of, we kind of notice that. We kind of feel like there's somebody, they're serving, they're, a small group, they're studying. And so, kind of, you know, uh, for my perspective, it kind of increases our trust in that maybe there's somebody that, I'd be interested in getting to know a little bit more.
I would also, oh, go ahead, Dave.
Let me add a couple of things. As a dad with 2 daughters, what you said about serving, if you see somebody serving, chances are they're not going to be, and don't take this in a bad way, everybody, but they're a little bit more selfless. And those are the people you really want to be. If you want to, chances are somebody who's serving the church is going to be a little bit more selfless, right? And that's a quality as a dad that you really wanted. It's like, look, this is my kid, and think about it. This is God's daughter. Honor her, put her up on a pedestal the way you should, right?
Yeah, I mean, I tell young women, what, how does that person treat, people, and they're like, people that would technically be like, other people serving them, like like people at a restaurant, or how do they treat other family members, or how do they treat other people? Like, you want to be able to see a lot of that, because when they don't think that you're necessarily kind of watching that, those are the kind of things I'm interested in, and you get to see that when someone's serving and being willing to be that humble person, and not, not having to have all the attention on them.
So tell us, maybe put it down in the chat tonight. The best, the ask ever and the worst. Help us guys out, man, because we need to be hit over the head with it sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I have another one. I have another one that you probably shouldn't use as a guy.
No.
Hey, I've got 2 fishes and you've got 5 loaves. Together we can make a miracle. I mean, that's something you should never ever say.
Oh boy.
Hey, Dan, are you married? Oh, good.
Yes, I am.
They didn't work for you, I guess.
Anyway, I was going to say one more thing too before we get to that question, is that I see the level of respect that someone has for another human being, just in general, becomes a huge part of a healthy relationship. And so when you look at someone, and even if you're attracted to them, if you can't see that person as someone who was worth the life of Jesus on the cross, then you probably shouldn't ask them out. Because as you said, Dave, it just goes right along with what you said, is that young woman, or that young man, is a child of the living God. And this last question from Amy says, how do you get a group of men that see you as one of the guys to see you as a woman? Okay, I can't even touch that because I'm not in that way. But what do you think, Barb?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So this is somebody that is obviously hanging out with some guys. They like to do the same things. Maybe they kind of just being one of the guys. I kind of, in a little bit of way relate to that, because I grew up with brothers, and I used to do all the, stuff with the play, road hockey and football, and so kind of was always just one of the guys. And unfortunately, none of those guys ever did see me as, someone that they'd want to date. But it didn't work for me. But I guess, when you start, if you're interested in one of the guys, then you kind of make that known, I guess, by how you kind of interact with them, and kind of show interest towards them. That is, I'm not, that's a tough one. I'm kind of stumped on that one.
Well, do you think it has something to do too? Because I know that when I was growing up, I was on the flip side, I was the friend to the girls, but I was not ever seen as someone that they'd be interested in dating. And so it actually does happen on the flip side too. And so you kind of wonder, how do you make that transition? Well, I would say, there's not an easy answer to that, but I would say that to make it clear in some friendships, I'm not really looking to just stay as friends. I would like to move further with that. And as you said before, how do you move on from that when they say no, or they don't show that? I'm not sure if that made any sense, but I did my best.
'Cause, sometimes you meet people that, I've met girls that kind of have this, they put off this persona that they're not interested. They're not, they don't want a boyfriend. So they're, and so, if that's something that you're interested in, then kind of, changing that, maybe that persona of I am interested,
Yeah.
And so, we kind of do things a little bit differently when we're actually, looking for someone, looking for a relationship.
It's so the one thing guys don't want to hear, you're just like my brother. Women don't want to hear, you're just like one of the dudes, right? It's exactly exactly right. I think that I'm super lucky. My wife was my fishing buddy, my ski buddy. We played tennis together, we played tournaments together, and she loved sports. So in that sense, she was kind of like one of the guys, but really pretty. but when I think about it, I don't know. That's a tough one, because I think still, my wife was a jock and still is, and all that. But there just wasn't any doubt that she was very feminine. Wasn't one of the guys in that sense, So I think it depends on the guy, And I can tell you, guys who like sports, man, my wife watches more sports than me. I really lucked out. So now I watch too many sports, but that's tough. I think, you have to kind of set that boundary yourself. It's, in a lot of ways, it's like, look, if you don't want to be perceived as one of the guys, don't put yourself in those situations. Are you sitting around a campfire with all guys and then yourself, or what have you? You know what I mean? Talking about guy stuff. I don't know. That's a tough one. That is a really tough one. It can be done. It can be done.
Because I think guys kind of know, if a woman is, interested in, in kind of that femininity that wants that kind of relationship. Lisa says, guys, if you're interested, be intentional. Don't beat around the bush.
I know. I love that comment.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there it is. That's good. One more thing too. I know we probably are running over time. I hope everybody's enjoying this conversation.
Yeah.
So,
still got a bunch of folks online. Yeah.
When I met my now wife, we actually did meet online, but it was AOL 3.0. Like, you stick the disc in, you knew dial up. And Barb, I'd love to share this story with you at some point. But we spent the first 6 months of our friendship on the phone talking, because we lived 3,000 miles away from each other. Wow. And so the beginning of our relationship was spent on focusing on communication. And so I think that, and and we started off as friends, and but at some point we had to make that leap, and it was just as awkward during some time frames. But I find that if we are open with each other in that communication, in that friendship, and building that communication together, then those conversations about, hey, can this move further, become a little bit easier to have,
Mhm.
because we're building that trust with someone where we think or we believe that they're not going to hurt us if we take that step towards them, and they kind of give the hands up kind of signal.
Yeah.
So I'm a
That's good.
yeah.
That's great. It really does. It really does make a difference. You're right. Because, as you're kind of going up those levels of intimacy at the moderate level, you're sharing what you like, you're sharing your beliefs, even on marriage or whatever. So you're already getting an idea of, is this someone that's kind of interested, and it gives you the courage to be able to just kind of be honest and open and upfront. I just still laugh about my son. Actually, they're the ones coming down to see me tomorrow, but
Awesome.
they went to that German Bible school, Bodenseehof in Germany.
Yeah.
And they knew each other the whole year, and they're playing games and hanging out in groups and everything, and they liked each other the whole time. But they were both committed not to have relationships. But then after they came home, it's like then they're not talking, they're all awkward, and then it's just like then my son, he just kind of went and said, okay, here's the deal. I really like you. Are you interested in me? Oh yeah, I've been like, we liked each other. So they were just young though, but it just kind of cracked me up. Like, it was like, it was meant to be. Like they just, he just hung in there and went after her. So.
Wow.
It's when you think about your situation, Dan,
Hmm.
meeting Tanya, it's kind of like, ever been in a completely black room? So your sight is taken away. So what happens is your hearing becomes more sensitive, right? Because you're missing that other thing. It's kind of like that when you're 3,000 miles away and all you have is this. I mean, it's probably not a bad thing in a lot of, it takes some other options away, if you know what I mean.
And we didn't have the video, because I'm gonna tell you right now, AOL back then was like a line at a time just to get a picture and an email.
Yeah, NASA didn't even have it then, right? What an incredible night, you guys. Rich, can you throw one last question? Is there anything left that we haven't covered?
Oh, I got some great comments while he's looking for one. Remembering when Lotus 123 and 512K memory seemed like enough. And then I think Lawrence Martin was like, floppy disks rock.
Understand the difference in the way.
The difference in the way men and women think should be our next lesson series. Yeah.
I'm game.
100%. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that's, that would be a series, probably a lot of, especially for like how women think, probably, How they always say, like, I know there's always those jokes. Yeah, I'll never be able to.
And instead of just singles, it's just adults, right?
Just adults in general.
Just adults.
You've heard that comment that men's brains are like waffles, with little compartments.
Yeah.
And then women's brains are like spaghetti, like everything's intertwined. So, yeah, it's kind of difficult to try to have these two brains sometimes communicate and go on stage.
Freshly married Steven Stromberg. How are you, brother?
Should they have any say? What role should extended family have, if any, in a relationship?
Something tells me this is coming from a place of experience.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a touchy one. That goes back to the leave and cleave concept, right? It's once you marry, you've started your own family, and that family becomes your priority. And so, yes, you love your extended family and you want to have them in your life, but you are now responsible for your own family, and that family really takes priority, and the needs of your individual family. And that's been something, even as my kids get married, that I've just worked at going, this is your family now. I want to be a part of it as much as I can, but you guys make the decision that's important for your family.
It's I'm so glad you said that because it is so true when ultimately what that decision comes down to. But I'm also thinking of another situation that happened with my wife and I when we first got married, and that was she would say, "Oh, I'm going to go ask my dad about that," and I would instantly get this like, "What do you mean ask your dad? I'm your husband. Why don't you ask me?" But yet I'm only like 24, 25 years old. What do I know? He's actually got more experience in that. So it took a level of understanding that just because I'm now married doesn't mean I have all the answers for my spouse.
Hmm.
So there should be some aspect of, hey, let's seek counsel from. Now,
Hmm.
I do think though that you got to be careful who you seek that counsel from, because sometimes if you seek counsel from the extended family and they don't like you, then they're going to be giving some counsel to your spouse that's going to be not necessarily what should be considered in the relationship.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead, Barb.
Well, I'm just going to, because that question was, should they have any say? So I was kind
Yeah,
of more thinking about that. But yeah, I mean, my dad would come over and help us, with stuff around the house. And of course, like we do that all the time with our kids. But, when it comes to making those decisions for your family,
yeah,
those are, you are a new family. So,
yeah. And nobody else can answer for those decisions other
Well,
than you and your spouse.
there definitely needs to be boundaries created for sure. I mean, in our early in our marriage, when we got ready to move to Sacramento, my mom didn't want us to move from San Jose, or we were actually in Scotts Valley. They were in San Jose, and she kind of told my wife that in not the nicest way possible. And my wife calls me a wreck, right? She's like, we've only been married I think 3 years at the time, and she really said some things that were painful. So I had to call mom and said, "Mom, what are you doing? This
Mm,
is our decision. This is our life. This is the boundary that we have. I'm not doing it." Just my wife was from Sacramento, so my mom thought, "Oh, you're going to be with her." I was like, "No, mom. We lived in Scotts Valley, and I think that was 91, and the median income per family back then was in Scotts Valley was 120,000, and we were making about half of that. It was really tough.
yeah,
Um, and we were doing fine. I wanted to change. I want to be close to the fishing, but I had to tell my mom. It's like I said, look, this is how it is. This is my family, and you don't do that to my wife, because that's we're gonna have a problem. We're a team now, and not that I don't value you. I remember telling her, it's not that I don't value your opinion on this, mom. However, we're doing this as a team, and I love
yeah.
you. And it's not fair to Mary Kay to put her through that.
Hey, we've actually both had that discussion with our extended
Yep.
family. I mean, we're right on target, Barb. I was just making a little. There's a little difference between when you
mhm.
need counsel versus when somebody's interjecting. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I had there was time frames where I'm not going to say which parents they were stopped talking to us for almost 6 months
Mm.
because we drew a line. We're like, no, I'm sorry, we didn't ask your counsel on this, and this is our decision. And so there was a rift that happened there. But it's super important to support the person that you're married to
Yeah.
above all else.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would argue to say all your friends, all your relationships, loyalty and commitment's a big thing.
Yeah.
What a great night. I know we've gone on, you guys. Barbara, you are amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So God centric
Mm.
and logical, loving and caring, and just your persona is, I think, allows people to be very comfortable. So I'm glad you're in the vocation that you are.
Yeah, definitely.
Because all of those things are really important. And you guys out there, thank you so much for chiming in, being real. I hope you got a lot out of this, and if we can, we'll get. And Barbara's obviously it is a heavily sought after speaker with some great things. So hopefully we can get you back at one of these times. And man, you guys, thank you so much. What a great series. Dan and I will be back next week. But Dan, would you close us in a bit of prayer as we head off tonight?
Oh, absolutely. And Barb, if you don't mind, I'm going to pray specifically for you and what God's got you doing too. Okay.
you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for these last 2 weeks. I know that when we hear wisdom that comes through someone, through their experience, through their education, Lord, when we truly listen, it should drive us to action. You said in your word, Lord, that when we're not just to be hearers of your word, but to be doers of your word. So, Father, I pray that as we've heard this incredible wisdom from Barb these last 2 weeks, that we would put them into action in our life. And I guarantee, because the Lord is behind these words that have been spoken, that they will affect a positive change in our lives.
Amen.
And Lord, I pray a blessing over Barb and her ministry, and also over her practice, and over all of the people that she comes in contact with. Lord, I already know that they'll be blessed as having met her, but Lord, I pray that their lives will be changed because they spent time with her. And Lord, that her family will be honored and blessed, and that she would never lack any good thing from you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Hey, one real quick thing. Last week started a 13-week single parenting class by the same people that put together the divorce care package. It's amazing. Rich put that together in the single parent group. If you guys want to be involved in it, it's phenomenal. Some of the communications and some of the things people were sharing the very first week was off the hook. So that's on Tuesday night at 7:00. Go check it out. It's on the singles page. We will be back here next week at the same time, 7:30. Man, we love you so much. You guys will see you next week.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah, and some people are asking just for my books and info, and I did have a slide on that. Or I don't know if you kind of put that up or send that to people.
Yeah, we can post it.
Totally post that. And yes, send us whatever we can do, whatever you're doing, Barb. Like if you're doing a 30-second ad for something that you're doing, send it to us. We'll share it. I think it's great stuff.